Hey, everybody. Today we're going to talk about a topic that allows things on Earth to move, and it's related to what we've been talking about. So let's go ahead and get started. So, your job today is going to be to watch this whole video, okay, which shouldn't take that long. And then what you're going to do is go to Google Classroom, the Goog, and you're going to take the little form or the Google Classroom form and answer a couple of questions about what you just watched. So there's a couple of options. You can watch the whole video and then answer these questions, or if you would like, you can go back and stop the video at a good time and answer the questions while you're doing that. So up to you, okay? But today what we're going to talk about is the official theory of plate tectonics. That's the unit that we're on. So we've already talked about the continental drift theory and seafloor spreading, which we talked about yesterday, the seafloor opening up and creating new seafloor. Well, once scientists knew about both of those things, they could say, oh, here we go. Here's a brand new theory that talks about why things move the way they do. That's called plate tectonics. So in order to understand plate tectonics, we kind of have to understand what's going on under the earth. So today we're going to explore what's happening under the earth. Here we go. So if we look at the earth, this is how it's structured, right? The layer that we live and stand on is called the crust, right? Kind of just like the crust of a pizza. Well, it's kind of the outside, right? Or the crust of a pie is the very top, right? Then as we go down, we get to a part called the mantle, kind of like a mantle on a fireplace. Then there's something called the outer core, and then there's the inner core. And I don't know if you've ever learned about these layers, but here's another view of them. Okay, so this top part here is called the crust. Okay, this is where the ocean and continents sit, right? So if we've got the continent, we've got the ocean, that whole part is called the crust. Underneath it, there's this layer, all of these yellow and orange and red layers called the mantle. Then there's this outer core, and then the very inside part of the earth called the core. Okay. And I don't know how much you've ever learned about this before, but here's another view. The Earth's core is super hot. The Earth's core is actually hotter than the sun if you were to touch the sun. The Earth's core, the inside of the Earth, is 13,000 degrees. Dang, it's super, super hot. So if this is where we're standing right here, it's kind of crazy. The Earth is so warm, but on the inside, there's this really deep central core that's super, super, super hot. So the Earth is kind of sitting like there's a little oven in the middle of it, okay? Except that oven makes a big deal because the oven is going to heat up a lot of different things, okay? So when we talk about plate tectonics, and when we talk about this theory, we're going to be talking about what's going on under the earth. Okay, so here's basically what happens. Okay, let's look at this picture on the right. And we kind of talked about this yesterday. But on this layer called the mantle kind of is a less solid layer. And basically, what happens is under the mantle, there's stuff called magma. Magma is a lot like lava. Okay, it's the name we give to lava when it's underground. But basically, directly under the earth, there's this mantle. And there's this stuff that's been heated up. Because if you think of the core, it's kind of like the bottom of a stove. Okay, so if we were looking at this and this was the bottom of the stove, it would heat up everything that's above it, right? So that's kind of what happens. So if we look at this picture, the core heats up what's inside the mantle and turns it kind of into like a lava magma, okay? And what ends up happening, this happens all the time in science, is that stuff that warms up gets heated up and starts to rise. As it rises, it pushes the colder stuff up here out to the side and eventually down. And as that's moving down, it fuels the hotter stuff back up. And what you end up with is this cycle called a convection current. Convection meaning heat, current meaning movement. And basically what's happening is the cycling of heat and pressure under the earth. I kind of think of it like I gave the bad example yesterday of a zit, right? If you get a zit on your face, it's kind of red and lumpy underneath, right? And eventually stuff might come out of it. That's exactly what's happening under here. Heat and pressure under the earth, that it's moving around and getting really hot and pressurized because of the core, right, is getting heated up. And there's so much heat and pressure that it pushes out. And when it pushes on these plates, it causes them to open. So, kind of another way to think about this is that I always think of air, like in your house. Hot air rises, cold air sinks. So, think about if you climbed maybe a ladder to fix a light bulb, or you've ever climbed the stairs in your house and you go up another level, especially in the summertime. What happens? It feels hotter, right? The same thing happens if you were to go in your basement or go down to the ground. It's cooler there. That's because hot air or hot water or hot matter always rises. It becomes lighter and rises. And the colder version of that sinks. And what ends up happening, the same thing happens in the earth, is that it starts to cycle and move around. So let's look at this pot of water that's on your left. If you notice, the cycling is happening right here where the hot water is getting heated by the bottom part. The bottom part of the stove heats up first, right? In this pot, and the water starts to heat up. It gets hot and it expands and it starts to rise, and it rises in the form of bubbles, right? And those bubbles start to form. But as it gets towards the top, there's still colder water up there. So the colder water is heavier and it gets pushed down, and it pushes pushes itself down, and then the hot air comes back up. So you get this circle, this current of air and matter moving. And what eventually happens is that you get these wooden blocks that are moving, right? If I put something floating in this water, they would start to move. That's what happens to the top part of Earth, to Earth's crust. When the stuff underneath gets hot and pressurized, it starts moving things on top. Okay, so we're going to watch a little video that tells us about exactly what happens. Here we go. Let's see the demonstration.
Hi, I'm Jared. Welcome to Fun Science Demos. The big idea today is that heat moves matter. Heat moves matter in this lamp, and heat moves matter in our Earth. So let's take a look at this lamp and see heat move matter. You can't see it, but there's a light bulb here, and it's hot. It gives off lots of heat, and that heat heats up this purple wax. You can see it. Woo! It causes it to rise to the top. When that wax gets hot, it rises to the top. And you can see some of the wax dropping down. Why? Well, as the heated wax moves to the top, it just hangs out there, and it's cooling off. And when it cools off, it drops. It drops back down. And when it drops back down, it gets heated back up and moves up. And it cools off and moves down. And it gets heated up and it moves up. And it cools off and it moves down. It's this cycle. It's happening in the lamp. And wouldn't you know, the same thing happens in our Earth. So let's take a look at this diagram and see how the Earth works. Through science, we've discovered that the middle of the Earth is really, really hot. We've also discovered that the outside of the Earth has this crust, and the moving matter inside the Earth can actually move the crust. As it's heated up, it rises up to the crust. It cools off and comes back down, just like this lamp, the wax in this lamp. It's happening inside of our Earth. The heat from the middle of the Earth is causing all this matter to move, and that makes the crust move. So let's take a look at that crust and the outside of the Earth. These are continents. That's where we live. The blue is the ocean. Oceans and continents actually sit on top of the crust. Well, what are these lines? Through science, we've discovered that the crust is actually broken into plates, and those plates move. Heat moves matter. Let's try and show you how that works. We have a heat source here. We have a heat source here. We have a heat source here. Our heat source is the middle part of the Earth. We need something to be the matter that heat energy can move around. We have our milk, and now we need something to be the crust. For that, we're using chocolate powder. So here's our setup. We modeled it after our Earth. We have our center hot part. There's the heat source down there making it hot. We have our crust, which you can see on the top. It's smooth right now. Something should happen as the matter, which you can't see, the milk, starts moving inside from the heat. Heat heats it up, rises, cools off, and sinks. There's movement happening. You can't see it yet. Let's zoom in and take a closer look. So our timer's going. Let's take a look at this setup and see what's going on here. Inside the pot, we have our liquid matter, much like the Earth. And we're heating that liquid matter, much like the Earth. And you can see the chocolate powder on top is our crust. It doesn't look like much is happening, but there's a lot going on underneath the crust, just like our Earth. So we're going to zoom in and take a closer look. But what should you be looking for? Well, that liquid matter under the crust is moving. It doesn't look like anything's happening to the crust, but as the liquid matter of the crust moves, the crust will start to move. And you'll actually see tiny cracks form, and those cracks will get bigger as the crust moves. So we're coming up on the 14 minutes, and now we can see our crust starting to crack. Why is that happening? Well, that liquid matter, we heated it up, and it's starting to move underneath the crust. And you can see that crust, they're called plates. Scientists call those plates, and they're starting to move. Look at this one right here. Seeing it start to separate? Take a look at these plates as they move. Why are they moving? The liquid matter underneath is moving too. Take a look right here. And right here, tiny cracks in the crust. The plates are going to start to move, and you'll see the cracks get bigger. Watch right here. Watch it open up. Watch right here and right here. Ooh, there's one forming right here. Now we have a crack forming here. The crust is breaking in the plates right before our eyes. Why is that happening? The liquid matter underneath the crust is moving. Now we can start to see it happen. You can see the plate movement.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there and we're going to go back. You are welcome to watch this. It's kind of cool at the end if you want to, but you get an idea of what's happening, right? What's happening with the plates that are occurring. So all this heat in the center of the earth is causing these plates to form. So if you look at this picture, here's what kind of happens is that we end up with all of these plates that have been separated and moved by the matter underneath, directly underneath the crust, and all these plates have formed. So what's eventually going to happen is, because you have these cracks, anytime there's movement in the matter underneath, like this is in a dish of water here, causes the plates to bump and move. So let me just read this part. It says, scientists now use their knowledge of convection currents in the Earth's core and combine it with a new theory. They take continental drift and seafloor spreading, they put it together. This is called plate tectonics. The plates or top layer of the earth moves or floats on the rest of the earth, just like the chocolate did on the milk, right? In the video. Kind of like if you laminated a map of the earth and then floated it in a bucket of water. If the water were heated, it would start to boil and move the laminated pieces on top. And this is how we think the earth is divided, right? So exactly what this dude was showing us is happening to the earth. And so that, together with plate tectonics and seafloor spreading, causes things like mountains and volcanoes and earthquakes to happen. And we're going to be exploring this more this week, okay? So your job right now is to go back to Google Classroom and answer those questions. Okay, guys, have a great day.